Dr. Vela Cross had learned to recognize the pattern: the sudden silence when she entered a room, the way conversations died mid-sentence, the careful distance people maintained as if proximity alone could contaminate them. On Research Station Meridian 7, she was simultaneously essential and untouchable. Her expertise in xenobiology made her irreplaceable for the joint human-Terran scientific mission, but her appearance made her unwelcome in every social context that mattered. The Terrans were a species humanity had contacted only 12 years ago, and Vela represented everything that made humans uncomfortable: elongated features falling into uncanny valley territory, skin that shifted through bioluminescent patterns when she experienced emotion, and most damning, the retractable crystalline structures along her forearms that uninformed humans insisted on calling claws, despite their actual function as sophisticated sensory organs. The rumors didn't help. Whispers that Terrans were aggressive, that bioluminescence indicated dangerous moods, that the crystalline structures were weapons poorly concealed. Never mind that Terran culture was fundamentally pacifist, that the bioluminescence was no more threatening than human blushing, that the claws had never been used for violence in recorded history. Fear didn't require facts, it just required difference. Vela had stopped trying to correct misconceptions after the first year. She focused on her work, maintained professional distance, and accepted that loneliness was the price of being the only Terran on a station where humans made up 90% of the population. Then Marcus Chen joined as the new head of engineering, and everything familiar became complicated. He arrived during a station-wide meeting where Vela was presenting atmospheric compatibility research. She noticed him immediately, not because he was remarkable, but because he was the only person actually looking at her instead of his datapad or the wall. When she finished and called for questions, Marcus raised his hand. "Dr. Cross, fascinating work on the nitrogen cascade effects. Have you considered whether the Helion-3 processors might be amplifying the atmospheric inconsistencies?" It was a good question, a relevant question, a question that engaged with her research rather than being an excuse to end the meeting. Vela answered it, watched him nod thoughtfully, and felt the unfamiliar sensation of being treated like a scientist rather than a threatening curiosity. After the meeting, Marcus approached directly, no careful distance, no obvious discomfort. "Dr. Cross, I'm Marcus Chen, new engineering head. I'd love to discuss your atmospheric findings in more detail. Would you be available for a working lunch tomorrow?" Every instinct told Vela this was a setup. Nobody on the station invited her to lunch. Yes, I'm available." "Great. How about 1,300 hours in the observation deck cafeteria?" He smiled, genuine, unforced. "I promise the food is marginally better than the standard mess hall fare." He left before Vela could process what had happened. Around her, other researchers were staring, their expressions mixing shock with disapproval. Vela ignored them, focusing on the unfamiliar feeling spreading through her chest. Hope, maybe. Or the dangerous beginning of expecting to be treated like she mattered. Marcus arrived exactly on time, carrying 2 trays because he'd noticed Vela standing in the cafeteria line alone, while other researchers carefully maneuvered to avoid being served next to her. "Figured I'd save you the trouble," he said, setting 1 tray in front of her. "I got the protein synthesis blend. The station AI says it's optimized for Terran nutritional requirements." Vela stared at the tray. "You researched Terran dietary needs?" "Well, yeah. Seemed rude to invite you to lunch and then watch you eat something incompatible with your biology." Marcus sat down like this was completely normal. Plus, the station database has a whole section on Terran culture that nobody seems to have read. "Did you know your people invented musical notation that accounts for 17 different frequency ranges? That's incredible." "But you read the cultural database." Vela's bioluminescent patterns shifted into colors she couldn't control: surprise, confusion, something dangerously close to gratitude. Most humans don't bother. Most humans are missing out on fascinating information then. Marcus pulled up a datapad. But we're here to talk about atmospheric processors, right? I had some thoughts about your nitrogen cascade theory. They talked for 2 hours. About science, about engineering challenges, about how Terran and human approaches complemented each other. Marcus asked questions that demonstrated he'd actually read her research, offered insights that showed he respected her expertise, and treated her crystalline sensory structures as exactly what they were: sophisticated biological instruments rather than threatening weapons. "Can I ask something personal?" Marcus said as their lunch stretched into mid-afternoon. "You can ask. I reserve the right not to answer." "Fair. What's it like being the only Terran on this station? I've noticed people avoid you. Is that normal for how humans treat your species?" Vela considered her response carefully. "Your species fears what it doesn't understand. My appearance triggers uncanny valley responses. The bioluminescence seems threatening because humans associate dramatic color changes with danger. And the crystalline structures." She extended one from her forearm, watching Marcus's expression carefully. "These frighten people who think they're weapons." Marcus leaned closer, genuinely curious rather than afraid. "May I?" At her nod, he examined the crystalline structure with scientific interest. "They're beautiful, like organic sensor arrays. What do they detect?" "Chemical compositions, temperature gradients, electromagnetic fields. They're how my people navigate complex environments and read emotional states through biochemical signals." Vela retracted the structure. "But humans see them and imagine violence." "Humans can be remarkably stupid about things that are different," Marcus said with casual honesty that made Vela's bioluminescence flare with startled appreciation. "For what it's worth, I think your people's evolutionary adaptations are extraordinary. And anyone who can't see past appearance to recognize your obvious brilliance is missing out on knowing a remarkable person." Vela's patterns shifted through colors indicating emotional overwhelm, joy, disbelief, the dangerous flutter of connection. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked quietly. "Why wouldn't I be? You're brilliant, your research is cutting edge, and you've been nothing but professional despite working in an environment where people treat you like a contaminant." Marcus met her eyes directly. "Kindness isn't a favor I'm doing you, Dr. Cross. It's basic human decency, or at least it should be." Over the following weeks, Marcus's consistent respect for Vela became visible enough that other station personnel noticed. He invited her to working meetings, cited her research in briefings, and continued their lunch conversations with regularity that suggested genuine friendship. The station's response was complicated. Some researchers began cautiously engaging with Vela's work, emboldened by Marcus's comfort around her. Others expressed concern that the new engineering head was too friendly with the Terran scientist. The breaking point came during a hull breach in Section 7 that threatened life support for 3 decks. Vela's expertise made her essential to emergency response, but when she arrived at the Crisis Command Center, she faced a room full of personnel who couldn't hide their discomfort. "Dr. Cross," the station commander acknowledged tersely, "we need your assessment of the atmospheric contamination patterns." Vela began her analysis, but the tension was palpable. Officers stood as far from her as possible, carefully avoiding proximity to her crystalline structures. When she extended them to take environmental readings, she heard someone inhale sharply. Fear, automatic and unconsidered. "The contamination is spreading faster than standard models predict," Vela reported, forcing herself to ignore the discomfort. "We need to reroute life support through secondary systems within 30 minutes or we'll lose." "Are you sure?" The security chief's question carried obvious skepticism. "Those readings seem extreme." "I'm certain. The atmospheric cascade is." "Maybe we should verify with human instrumentation," someone else suggested. "No offense, Dr. Cross, but your equipment might be reading differently than our sensors." They meant her crystalline structures. They were questioning her professional assessment because her biological sensors were alien. Vela felt her bioluminescence shift into colors indicating hurt and frustration, colors that made several officers step back further. Dr. Cross's assessment is correct, Marcus said, entering with his own readings. I just verified her data with engineering sensors. The atmospheric cascade is accelerating exactly as she predicted. If we don't act in 28 minutes, we'll lose life support to 3 decks. He looked around with obvious disapproval. And her equipment is more sophisticated than anything we have. Maybe trust the expert instead of questioning her because she doesn't look human. The room went silent. The commander cleared his throat. Right, Dr. Cross, what do you recommend? They followed her recommendations. The crisis was averted. Afterward, Marcus found Vela in an empty observation deck, her bioluminescence cycling through patterns indicating emotional exhaustion. You didn't have to defend me, Vela said quietly. Yes, I did. They were letting prejudice override professional judgment. That's not just unfair to you, it's dangerous for everyone on the station. Marcus sat beside her, close enough that their proximity would scandalize the officers who'd maintained careful distance. I'm sorry you have to work in an environment where your expertise is constantly questioned because of how you look. But I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be. The hull breach incident shifted something on the station. Not dramatically, prejudice didn't evaporate, but noticeably. A few researchers began asking Vela questions directly. Her bioluminescence stopped causing quite so many startled reactions. The careful distance decreased from meters to feet, and Marcus's friendship with her became something the station gradually, reluctantly accepted. 6 months after Marcus's arrival, Vela found herself in the observation deck again, but this time not alone. Marcus had developed a habit of finding her there during off hours, bringing coffee for himself and the Terran equivalent for her. Can I ask you something? Vela said during one comfortable silence. Always. Why did you start treating me with respect when everyone else had already decided I was something to fear? You could have followed that pattern without consequence. Marcus was quiet, looking out at the stars. My grandmother was Korean, moved to the U.S. when she was young. She told me stories about being the only Asian woman in her engineering program, about people assuming she was less capable because she looked different. She said the loneliest thing wasn't the overt prejudice. It was watching people who knew better stay silent. He turned to Vela. When I arrived and saw how people treated you, I recognized the pattern. I thought about my grandmother, about how she said the few people who treated her with basic respect changed her entire experience. I figured I could either perpetuate isolation or challenge it. So you chose kindness as a challenge to station culture. I chose to treat a brilliant scientist with the respect she deserved. That it challenged station culture was a bonus. Marcus smiled. Though I'll admit, getting to know you has been the best part. You're fascinating, Vela. Not because you're Terran, but because you're brilliant, thoughtful, and funnier than you let most people see. Vela's bioluminescence shifted into colors she'd carefully suppressed. Warm tones indicating affection, connection, the dangerous territory of caring about someone's opinion beyond professional courtesy. I've been isolated so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as a person rather than a category. You've given me that. It matters more than I know how to express. You just expressed it pretty clearly, Marcus said gently. And for what it's worth, I see you, Vela. Not the rumors, not the assumptions, not the alien scientist who makes people uncomfortable. I see the person who's patient enough to explain atmospheric theory to an engineer who barely passed chemistry, who has opinions about station cafeteria food she shares with deadpan delivery, who lights up, literally, when talking about subjects that fascinate her. He hesitated, then added quietly, I see someone I care about, a lot. If that's not completely inappropriate to say. Vela's crystalline structures extended slightly, an involuntary response that would have frightened most humans. Marcus didn't flinch. It's not inappropriate, Vela said. It's reciprocated, deeply reciprocated. Though I should warn you that Terran emotional attachment comes with bioluminescent displays that humans find startling. I like your bioluminescence. It's like having a direct line to your emotional state, honest communication. You're the only human who's ever said that. Then other humans are missing out. Marcus reached for her hand, the one with crystalline structures partially extended, and held it gently. Is this okay? More than okay. Vela's bioluminescence brightened into patterns indicating joy, contentment, the profound relief of being touched with affection rather than fear. This is the first time another being has touched me with kindness since I arrived on this station. Then I'm honored to be the first. Marcus studied their joined hands, human and Terran, different but compatible. And I promise I won't be the last. You deserve to be treated like the remarkable person you are, Vela, like a lady, with all the respect and care that implies. The station would talk, would speculate, would take time to adjust.